You watch your companions sleep, but do you really know the beast that lives in your living room? Beneath that docile appearance lies a perfect predator's anatomy, honed over millennia of evolution to transform the domestic cat into a biological machine of unparalleled precision. Today on MeowTube, we'll unravel the enigma of its feline behavior and secret language, exploring everything from its wild origins and the curiosities of its senses to the hidden psychology behind its domestication, to finally reveal why this creature is the greatest masterpiece of natural engineering. Welcome to MeowTube, the channel for cat lovers. Part 1. The Perfect Machine. Anatomy, Senses and Origin. The Domestic Contradiction. When we observe the animal kingdom through the lens of evolutionary biology, we find countless examples of specialization and adaptation. However, few creatures represent such a resounding triumph of natural design as the Felis catus. If we remove the cultural context from our pets, if we strip the cat of its name and its place on our sofa, what remains before us is a masterpiece of biological engineering. We are faced with the ultimate predator in its weight class, a killing machine so efficient that nature has barely deemed it necessary to modify its design in thousands of years. In this comprehensive analysis, we will deconstruct the anatomy, the sensory capacity, and genetic origin of this animal to help us understand why, beneath the soft appearance of a domestic companion, dwells one of the most lethal and perfect forces in the biosphere. We begin by confronting a fascinating contradiction, i.e. a paradox that defines the modern existence of the cat. The evolutionary success of this species is indisputable and unparalleled among terrestrial carnivores. It is estimated that there are currently more than 450 million cats in the world. They have colonized virtually every continent and every climate, adapting to life in urban skyscrapers and rural farms with equal ease. But the true paradox lies in their psychological and social status. We have invited into our homes an animal that is, in essence, untamable. Unlike the dog, whose evolution has been shaped to serve and obey humans, the cat maintains a fierce independence. They are domesticated animals, yes, but they retain intact the wild instincts of their ancestors. They are affectionate and seek the warmth of home, but at the same time, they are perfectly equipped solitary killers. This duality is not an accident. It is the result of an anatomical design that requires no modification. The cat that sleeps at the foot of your bed is, biologically speaking, identical to the one that stalked the savannas of the Fertile Crescent millennia ago. Skeletal and muscular engineering. To understand this efficiency, we must perform a functional autopsy of its skeletal and muscular engineering. The foundation of feline agility, that almost fluid ability to move and contort, lies in its spine. While the human spine is a structure designed primarily for vertical support and load-bearing, the cat's spine is a mechanism for energy transmission and flexibility. Its vertebrae are connected much more loosely than ours, joined by exceptionally thick and elastic intervertebral discs that act as high-performance shock absorbers. This architecture allows for a rotation of almost 180 degrees on its torso. The tail facilitates not only the cleaning of its own fur, but also the ability to correct its posture in milliseconds during a fall or a chase. Far from being a mere aesthetic ornament, the tail functions as a dynamic counterweight, an extension of the spine that adjusts the animal's center of gravity in real time, allowing it to make tight turns at high speed without losing its balance, similar to the function of a seesaw on a tightrope. But the true genius of its skeleton lies in its forelegs. In most mammals, and certainly in humans, the clavicle is firmly anchored to the sternum and shoulder, providing stability but limiting range of motion. The cat, and on the other hand, has evolved to possess what we call floating shoulders. Its clavicle is a vestigial tiny bone that doesn't articulate with the rest of the skeleton, held in place only by ligaments and muscles. This anatomical feature has two fundamental consequences. First, it allows the cat to extend its forelimbs far beyond what a fixed joint would permit, lengthening its stride while running. And second, and perhaps more impressively, it gives it the ability to compress its shoulder width to squeeze through any opening large enough for its head. If the skull passes, the rest of the body will pass, turning them into expert infiltrators and escape artists. Upon this skeletal chassis is mounted a muscular system designed not for endurance, but for pure explosiveness. The cat's muscular physiology is the biological equivalent of a race car of acceleration, not of a rally car. Its muscles are composed predominantly of fast twitch fibers. These fibers consume energy at a dizzying rate to generate immense mechanical power in brief bursts. This explains why a cat can jump vertically up to 5 or 6 times its own height from a static position, a feat that for a human would be equivalent to jump over a 3-story building without taking a running start. However, this design comes at a metabolic cost. The cat tires quickly. It's no marathon runner, it is an elite sprinter. Their hunting strategy is based on absolute stealth, followed by a swift attack, not on a prolonged chase that depletes their glycogen reserves. This need for stealth leads us to analyze its locomotion. The cat is a digitigrade animal, meaning it walks permanently on its toes. Unlike humans, who are plantigrade and walk on their entire heel, the cat only puts weight on its toes. This not only lengthens the effective leg, improving speed, but also reduces the surface area in contact with the ground, minimizing noise. Its paw pads act as natural silencers, absorbing impact and allowing a predator weighing several kilograms to move with the weightlessness of a feather, approaching its prey without triggering any auditory alarms until it's too late. The sensory arsenal. While their physical structure is impressive, it's their sensory arsenal that truly elevates them to the status of apex predator. Cats perceive a reality far richer and more complex than our own. They live in a world of stimuli that simply don't exist for humans. Let's begin with vision. Feline vision is often misunderstood with the assumption that they see in total darkness, which is incorrect. What they possess is an extraordinary capacity for light amplification. Their eyes are enormous in proportion to their skull and are equipped with a layer of tissue located behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum. This structure acts like a biological mirror. Light enters the eye, strikes the retina, passes through the tapetum, and is reflected back to the retina, giving the photoreceptors a second chance to capture the photons. This allows them to see with astonishing clarity with just 1/6 of the light that a human being would need. Their pupils, those iconic vertical slits, are highly sophisticated dynamic diaphragm mechanisms, and they can dilate to fill almost the entire eye to capture the maximum amount of nighttime light, or contract into thin vertical lines to protect the retina from intense sunlight, offering far more precise control over the amount of light entering the eye than our round pupils. However, evolution is a game of trade-offs. To gain this night vision and sensitivity to movement, the cat has sacrificed detail and color. Its world is less vibrant than ours, seeing primarily in shades of blue and green, and its distance vision is less sharp. But they don't need to read a newspaper from 30 meters away. They need to detect the movement of a mouse 3 meters in the dim light, and for that task, his eyes are unsurpassed. A cat's sense of hearing is arguably even more advanced than its sight. A cat's ears are not simply passive receivers, they are motorized satellite dishes. They possess more than 30 muscles. Cats have independent ears in each ear, allowing them to rotate 180 degrees individually and scan their surroundings like radar. Their hearing range is astonishing, extending into ultrasonic frequencies far beyond what dogs and, of course, humans can hear. This ability isn't random. It's evolutionarily calibrated to detect the high-frequency squeaks small rodents use to communicate. A cat can hear the conversation of its prey. Furthermore, its brain performs instantaneous triangulation calculations. By comparing the infinitesimal time difference in when a sound reaches one ear versus the other, a cat can pinpoint the exact source of a noise with pinpoint accuracy, even in total darkness, allowing it to launch a deadly attack without visual confirmation. How a cat's sense of touch transcends the skin. Its primary tactile tool is the vibrissae, colloquially known as whiskers. These are not hairs, they are sensory receptors deeply embedded in the skin, connected to a nervous system rich in nerve endings and with a disproportionately large representation in the somatosensory cortex of the feline brain. Whiskers detect air currents, allowing the cat to sense nearby objects without touching them, simply by perceiving how the object alters the airflow as it moves. They are tools for nighttime navigation and close-range hunting. When a cat captures prey, its eyes cannot focus at such a short distance, less than 25 centimeters. So the whiskers rotate forward to envelop the prey and provide tactile information about its position and vitality, guiding the lethal bite to the nape of the neck Even their sense of smell and taste possess alien characteristics to us. The cat possesses the Jacobson's organ, or the vomeronasal organ, located in the palate just behind the incisor teeth, is a muscle that can cause a cat to stand still with its mouth half open and a strange expression, Flayman's response. It is trapping odor molecules from the air and pressing them with its tongue against this organ. It chemically analyzes the environment. It is a hybrid sense, halfway between smell and taste, used mainly to detect pheromones and analyze the reproductive or territorial status of other cats, but also to obtain complex information about its surroundings. To conclude our analysis of his hardware, we must mention his vestibular system, responsible for his legendary reflexes. The inner ear mechanism that regulates balance is so finely tuned that it allows for the famous righting reflex. When a cat falls, its eyes and vestibular system instantly inform the brain of its position relative to the ground. In a sequence of movements that defies our perception of time, the cat first rotates its head, then its spine, and finally its hind legs, arching its back to absorb the impact. All of this occurs while it is in the air, using the conservation of angular momentum to rotate without a fixed point of support. It is a demonstration of applied physics executed by instinct, the evolutionary origin. Now, having dissected the machine, we must ask ourselves, where did this perfect design come from? What is the origin of this creature that combines elegance and lethality? The answer leads us to the northern sands of Africa and the Middle East. All modern domestic cats, from the most refined Siamese to the most feisty street cat, descend from a single subspecies, the Felis sylvestris libica, or African wildcat. Herein lies the fundamental distinction between the cat and the dog, and the key to understanding their nature. The dog, domestic wolf dog, diverged from the wolf tens of thousands of years ago, and, through selective breeding, has drastically diverged genetically, both in behavior and morphology. A Chihuahua has little to do physically with a grey wolf. However, comparative genetic studies between the domestic cat and the African wildcat reveal a surprising truth. They are virtually indistinguishable. The genome of the domestic cat has barely changed compared to its wild ancestor. And this means that the evolution of the cat was not a process of forced domestication or intensive selection to change its form, but rather a slight behavioral adaptation. The African wildcat was already a perfect rodent hunter. We didn't need it to be bigger, faster, or have a different shape to be useful to us. Nature had already done the heavy lifting over millions of years of refinement. The only thing that changed was a slight reduction in the size of the brain and adrenal glands, which reduced its reactivity to fear and stress, allowing him to tolerate human presence. Therefore, the cat that lives in your home is not a degraded or artificial version of a wild animal. It is, for all practical purposes, a wild animal that has decided to cohabit with you. Its anatomy, senses, and instincts are those of a desert predator, designed for survival in harsh environments. It hasn't forgotten how to hunt, how to kill, or how to survive without us. It has simply opted for the comfort we offer. This fidelity to its original design is what makes the cat so fascinating. When we watch a cat stalk a feather toy, we're not seeing innocent play. We're witnessing the activation of a predatory behavior sequence that has remained unchanged and successful for millennia. They are living fossils of evolutionary perfection, precision biological machines that grant us the privilege of stroking their fur, concealing beneath that softness the anatomy of nature's most efficient killer. If you've been captivated by discovering the biological engineering hidden within your feline friend, subscribe now so you don't miss the next installment of this in-depth analysis. In the next chapter, we'll decode the software of this perfect machine, its hidden psychology and secret language. Turn on notifications and join us as we unlock the mind of the beast. Part 2. The Feline Enigma, Behavior, Development and Language. After having dissected, having learned from the formidable biological engineering that constitutes the cat's body, we must now delve into an even more complex and often misunderstood territory, its mind. If anatomy is the hardware structure perfected by natural selection for efficient predation, behavior, cognitive development, and communication systems constitute the software that operates this machinery. Understanding the domestic cat requires shedding the human projections we often impose upon them. They are not small, furry humans, nor are they distant versions of dogs. They possess their own psychology, forged by unique evolutionary pressures that have resulted in a fascinating ontogeny and a social structure invisible to the untrained eye. In this segment, we will explore how an organism born defenseless becomes a precision killer, how its secret society is organized, and how it has deciphered the code to communicate with us, manipulating our own biology in the process. The life cycle, from helpless to predator. The cat's life cycle begins in a state of absolute vulnerability, a dramatic contrast to the lethality it will reach in maturity. At birth, the cat is an altricial creature. This means they are born in a state of incomplete development and total dependence. They are functionally blind, as their eyelids are sealed to protect the final development of the retina, and deaf with closed ear canals. In this primordial stage, their world is reduced to two critical variables: touch and smell. Thermoregulation is inefficient, so their survival depends on the thermal bond with their mother and litter. They navigate to the food source using an olfactory and tactile map, swimming with clumsy movements toward their mother's warmth. It is fascinating to note that even in this stage of helplessness, the predatory instinct exists latently. The only complex behavior they exhibit is kneading on their mother's belly to stimulate milk flow, a movement they will paradoxically retain in adulthood as a reminder of comfort and security. The chronology of feline development is a biological arms race. Around the 10th day, their eyes open, although their vision is initially blurry and lacks depth perception. However, the true cognitive and motor explosion occurs from the 3rd week onward. This is when they begin to take their first tentative steps, initiating the training of their vestibular system. Around the 5th week, the transformation is astonishing. The clumsy animal has disappeared, and full feline capabilities emerge. Hearing becomes directional, eye-claw coordination is established, and fine motor control begins. It is an accelerated development designed to minimize the time of vulnerability in the wild. Between the 6th and 8th week, physical development gives way to behavioral development through play. To a human observer, a group of kittens chasing each other might seem like a scene of playful innocence. From an ethological perspective, however, we are witnessing a hunting simulation. Every jump, every ambush of a sibling, and every inhibited bite is a repetition of the predatory sequence: stalking, pursuit, capture, and the fatal bite. Play is not leisure. It is the calibration of their hunting instincts. They learn to judge distances, to gauge the force needed to subdue without seriously injuring within the social context, and to refine their reflexes. It is during this period that the neuromuscular coordination that will allow them months later to capture a bird in flight is established. However, the most critical aspect of early development is not physical, but psychological, the window of socialization. This period, which spans approximately from the 2nd to the 7th week of life, i.e. is the determining moment that will dictate the cat's relationship with the environment and with other species. Brain plasticity is at its highest during this stage. If a cat lacks positive and frequent contact with humans during these critical weeks, its brain structure becomes closed to the possibility of seeing humans as allies or companions. This is the fundamental difference between a domestic cat and a feral or wild cat. Genetically, they are identical. The difference is purely a matter of software installed during this brief window of time. A cat that misses this window will revert to its ancestral wild state, seeing humans not as providers of affection, but as potential threats or large predators. Therefore, a cat's domestication is an acquired and cultivated trait, not an immutable genetic guarantee. Social psychology and hierarchy. As cats mature, we enter the complex realm of their social psychology, an area rife with popular myths. The most widespread belief is that cats are antisocial and solitary animals. This statement is a half-truth that distorts reality. Cats are indeed solitary hunters. Unlike wolves or lions, which hunt in packs to take down large prey, cats hunt small prey that are not enough to share. Evolutionarily, hunting alone is an energetic necessity. However, being a solitary hunter does not imply being a social hermit. When food resources are abundant, as is the case in urban colonies or in our homes, cats develop complex and rich social structures. Natural feline society is fundamentally a cooperative matriarchy. In free-ranging cat colonies, the core group consists of related females, mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, who actively collaborate in raising the kittens. This has been extensively documented, including the seminal studies of the zoologist David MacDonald, how female cats assist in the births of each other and practice communal rearing, nursing kittens that are not their own to ensure the survival of the shared genetic lineage. This cooperation refutes the idea of feline selfishness. Males, on the other hand, tend to be more peripheral and transient, orbiting these matriarchal groups and defending larger territories. It is imperative to understand that the social structure of cats is radically different from that of dogs, which often leads to misunderstandings in human-cat coexistence. Dogs, as descendants of wolves, understand and need a strict vertical hierarchy, leaders and followers, dominance and submission. We cats do not have this concept in their operating system. There is no alpha cat in the canine sense. Feline society is one of free association and equality, based more on the control of resources and temporary territories than on social domination. When a human tries to dominate or punish a cat based on the canine logic of submission, the cat does not interpret it as, "I have done something wrong and he is the boss," but rather as, "This large organism has become aggressive and unpredictable, I must avoid him." The relationship with a cat is horizontal, a constant negotiation of mutual respect, not a chain of command, secret communication. This invisible society is held together by an extraordinarily sophisticated communication system that largely operates outside the spectrum of human perception. All the cat's primary language is chemical. They live immersed in a world of scents that are coded messages. We must distinguish between two types of scent marking, territorial and social. Urine marking, the infamous spraying, is a long-range signal, a warning of ownership, and a chemical barrier to avoid direct physical conflict with rivals. It is a message of exclusion. On the contrary, social branding. This occurs through sebaceous glands distributed across the cat's face, chin, cheeks, and forehead. These glands secrete pheromones of appeasement and familiarity. When a cat engages in what ethologists call bunting, or rubbing its head against your legs, furniture, or other cats, it's not simply asking for affection, it's depositing its chemical signature, creating a group scent. By rubbing against you, while it's layering its scent onto yours and vice versa, building in a communal olfactory identity that tells any other member of the colony, "This individual is part of my tribe, it's safe." It's an act of chemical inclusion, a way of labeling its environment and its companions to reduce anxiety and create a shared sense of security. Finally, we arrived at vocal communication. This is the area where evolutionary manipulation is most evident. Cats possess a surprisingly wide vocal range, but two sounds stand out for their function and complexity: purring and meowing. Purring is a fascinating and mysterious biomechanical mechanism produced by the rhythmic vibration of the laryngeal muscles controlled by a neural oscillator in the brain. Purring isn't exclusive to moments of pleasure. Cats purr when they're happy, yes, but they also do so when they're hurt, scared, or even dying. Science has discovered that the frequency of these vibrations, which oscillates between 25 and 150 Hz. This corresponds exactly to the frequencies used in vibration therapies to promote bone density, tendon healing, and pain relief. It is very likely that purring is originally a self-healing and internal maintenance mechanism, a way to keep the body in optimal condition during long periods of inactivity and to soothe itself in situations of extreme stress. Meowing, on the other hand, represents the triumph of interspecies communicative adaptation. In the wild, adult cats rarely meow at each other. Communication between adults is primarily olfactory and physical, ear and tail postures, fur erection. Meowing is a juvenile vocalization, used by kittens to get their mother's attention. However, domestic cats have retained this behavior into adulthood exclusively to communicate with humans. They have discovered that we are deaf to their chemical signals and blind to their subtle body language, but that we react instantly to sound. Even more unsettling and brilliant is the fact that cats have modulated their meows to maximize our response. Bioacoustic studies have shown that a domestic cat's soliciting meow the one it uses when it wants food, contains a hidden high-frequency component that is almost identical in terms of sound spectrum to the distressed cry of a human baby. This sound hacks our brain, activating regions associated with parental care and urgency, making it almost impossible to ignore. This is not a coincidence. It is convergent evolution driven by cohabitation. The cat has learned to speak to us in the one language we cannot biologically ignore. They have developed a specific language, an interspecies pidgin, tailor-made for managing their human caregivers. Thus, the feline enigma reveals itself not as an attitude of indifference, but as a complex web of adaptive behaviors. From its early development, where socialization determines its destiny, to a matriarchal social structure based on cooperation, and culminating in a communication system that combines secret chemistry with auditory manipulation, the cat proves to be an organism of overwhelming psychological sophistication. They are not mere decorative pets. They are complex cognitive entities that have deciphered how to live in two worlds simultaneously, the sensory world of their wild ancestors and the emotional world of human homes. If you were surprised to discover the evolutionary manipulation behind the meow or the complexity of their invisible society, support this documentary with a like. Your interaction is vital so we can reveal the conclusion of this saga, the story of our ancient alliance, and the feline's global conquest. Part 3. A Millennial Alliance, Global Conquest and the Human Bond. Having examined the biomechanical perfection and cognitive sophistication of the cat, we must now address the historical and sociological dimensions of our coexistence. How is it possible that a solitary predator, and designed for the aridity of the African deserts and genetically programmed for distrust, has managed to conquer the entire planet and establish itself at the epicenter of human life? The history of the domestic cat is not one of forced submission like that of the horse or the ox. It is a chronicle of opportunism, mutual benefit, and an unprecedented geographical expansion driven by human technology. In this final phase of our analysis, we will explore the origins of this alliance, human intervention in its genetics, and the ethical and scientific challenges that define the future of our relationship with the species Felis catus. History of domestication. To understand the present, we must go back approximately 10,000 years to the Fertile Crescent, and more specifically to the height of ancient Egypt around 4000 BC, or it was here that the original contract was signed. Unlike dog domestication, which was an active process where humans selected wolves for hunting and protection, cat domestication was a process of self-selection. It was the cat that decided to approach. With the invention of agriculture and large-scale grain storage, humanity inadvertently created an irresistible artificial ecosystem, granaries. These storage facilities attracted rodent pests in densities never before seen in nature. For the African wildcat, human settlements represented an inexhaustible and concentrated food source. Egyptian farmers, observing that these felines exterminated the pests that threatened their crops and transmitted diseases, adopted a stance of benevolent tolerance. They did not confine the cats, they simply allowed them to be. And this relationship is biologically defined as commensalism, which evolves into mutualism, a mutually beneficial arrangement where both parties gain without any ownership relationship. Over time, this practical utility transcended into the spiritual realm. The figure of the cat was elevated to a divine status, personified in the goddess Bastet. She was the protector of the home, fertility, and war. However, it is crucial to understand that this deification was a reflection of her functional value. Protecting the grain was protecting the very life of civilization. But how did the cat get from the banks of the Need to colonize from Tokyo until New York? The answer lies in maritime expansion. The cat became an essential crew member in the history of navigation. Ships laden with provisions for long voyages were magnets for rats and mice that not only devoured the food, but also gnawed through the ropes and wood. The Phoenicians, the great merchants of the Mediterranean, were the first vectors of this global expansion. They carried cats on their ships to protect their cargo, and in each port where they docked, some of these felines disembarked, establishing genetic colonies that we can still trace today. Interestingly, it is believed that the prevalence of black cats in certain ancient port cities is due to natural and human selection favoring these animals for their superior camouflage during nighttime hunting on the decks of ships. Even more surprising is the legacy of the Vikings. Far from the barbaric image, the Norse were sophisticated traders who greatly valued cats. The ancient DNA studies have revealed that Vikings transported cats from the Middle East to northern Europe and Greenland. In fact, the gene that codes for orange or red tabby fur follows the exact route of the Viking expeditions. When we see a common European tabby cat in a port in Norway or Scotland today, we are seeing the direct descendants of those guardians of the Viking ships which enabled the Nordic expansion by keeping pests under control. It was a silent conquest, traveling as luxury stowaways in the wake of human progress. Genetics and races, the hand of man. However, in the last 2 centuries, the relationship between humans and cats has undergone a dramatic shift, aesthetic intervention. For millennia, the breeding of cats was dictated exclusively for the selection. Naturally, the fittest survived, the best hunters are the most resistant to disease. But in the Victorian era, the concept of pedigree and cat shows emerged, ushering in an era of artificial selection that has had mixed consequences. We must distinguish between natural breeds and designer breeds. Breeds like the Maine Coon, the Norwegian Forest, or the Siberian. These aren't human inventions, they're climatic adaptations. And these are cats that developed a larger size, waterproof fur, and robust bone structures to survive brutal winters. Humans simply codified their breed standard. Similarly, spontaneous mutations like that of the cat manx, without a tail, or the sphinx, hairlessness, are genetic curiosities that man has decided to perpetuate. But ethical criticism arises with modern breeding practices geared toward extreme aesthetics, often at the expense of the animal's health. The most blatant example is the modern Persian cat and flat-faced exotic breeds. Through aggressive selective breeding, we have shortened their skulls to the point of causing severe brachycephaly. This is not an adorable feature, it is an anatomical deformity that causes airway obstruction, chronic dental problems due to lack of jaw space, and blocked tear ducts. We have taken the perfect machine described in the first part of this analysis and sabotaged it to satisfy a human visual whim. The fragility of the modern Siamese, with its excessively triangular skull and predisposition to neurological problems, contrasts painfully with the robustness of the traditional Siamese or Thai. There is an urgent veterinary and ethical debate about the need to restore functionality to these breeds, prioritizing health over a caricatured aesthetic of the urban cat and the future. Looking to the present and the future, we encounter the phenomenon of the urban cat. The cat has gone from being an outdoor farming tool to an indoor emotional companion. This transition brings its own challenges. An animal with intact hunting and territorial patrolling instincts confined to a 70 square meter apartment can develop stress, obesity, and destructive behavior if the environment isn't adapted. This is where the concept of catification comes in. The need to design our living spaces with verticality in mind. Shelves, ceiling scratching posts, and escape routes aren't luxuries. They're biological necessities for an animal that lives in 3 dimensions. Adapting our homes is the fair price to pay for depriving them of their natural territory. However, the greatest challenge to our current alliance is overpopulation. The cat's reproductive efficiency, designed to compensate for high mortality in the wild, becomes a mathematical problem in protected urban environments where there are no predators and food is plentiful. A single female cat and her offspring can theoretically produce thousands of cats in just a few years. Street colonies pose public health and animal welfare dilemmas. The ethical and scientific response to this problem is the method TNR, trap, sterilize and release. Systematic extermination is not only cruel but also ineffective due to the vacuum effect. If you eliminate a colony, other cats will migrate to occupy the available resources. Sterilization is the only tool that stabilizes the population and allows for sustainable coexistence, transforming pest management into welfare management. Finally, the alliance between humans and cats has entered a new frontier, biomedicine. The feline genome is strikingly similar to the human genome in the organization of its chromosomes, more so than that of rodents. This makes the cat an invaluable model for research into diseases that affect us both. The most prominent example is research on the FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus, the feline analogue of human HIV. Cats possess a natural resistance and adaptive mechanism to the virus that could hold the key to developing vaccines or cures for AIDS in humans. Furthermore, the study of their genetic diseases, such as polycystic kidney disease or retinal atrophy, is shedding light on the same pathologies in our species. The cat, which once protected our food, now protects our health through its shared genetic legacy. Conclusion: the single contract. When we consider the entirety of what has been presented, from its anatomy as a perfect predator and its complex psychology to its historical journey alongside us, a fundamental truth emerges about the nature of our relationship. The cat is the only domesticated species that has never been completely subjugated. There is no master-slave relationship, no leader-follower one. What exists is a unique contract between two intelligent species. The cat offers us its affection, its aesthetic beauty, and its vibrant companionship, but it does so on its own terms, maintaining an autonomy that often baffles us. This independence is not a flaw, it is its greatest virtue. It reminds us that we are not masters of nature, but rather participants in it. They live with us because they find comfort and security, because the emotional bond is real and reciprocal, not because an evolutionary chain or forced training compels them. In a world where humankind seeks to control everything, the cat remains an elegant and untamed reminder of the wild. They live with us because they want to, not because they must. And in that free choice lies the true value, the true miracle of having a miniature tiger sleeping in our lap. Now that you understand that the presence of that little tiger on your lap is a choice of freedom and affection, I invite you to observe your companion with new eyes. Tell us in the comments what wild trait you identify in your cat and how this unique bond manifests in your home. If you're looking to continue exploring the complexity of the natural world with this level of rigor, this channel is for you. Stay with us for the next journey.